Hello, I'm the Pink Phantom, and this is my podcast. Join me as I delve into the world of games and gaming, and especially old school RPGs. Together, let's voyage into the astral realm and check out my Phantom thoughts. In this episode, we hear from Riley, and then in the world of the Dragon Slayers, what did happen to that intelligent staff that Cudgel had after the encounter with the werewolves? Let's see.
Hey, Pink Phantom, Riley here. Sorry, I'm really behind on my call-in, so this is going to span a few episodes and go quite far back, I think. But I'll talk about your latest episode first. What a cool encounter with the Aspens and the Dragons. I really liked the playback of the combat. Maybe you could mix it up and have like the last couple rounds rolled live. That's quite difficult to do. Obviously, you don't know what those will be, but it was a pretty cool combat. I think it's probably too long to play all that out live, so it was kind of nice to have that condensed. I'm imagining players finding two dead gold dragons, a cart piled with gold, and then just a trail of death of all these aspens leading back to their lair, and then finding the cow and the ancient dragon sort of wrapped in their death blows. It'd be a pretty cool thing to stumble upon in a game. Then going back to RPG classifications, right? In a way, I think we kind of do have these, and I agree with Jason that, like, you know, for 5e and some of these big generic games that are trying to have broad appeal, I think putting labels on them is probably going to hurt their marketing, so I don't think we'll see that. But we kind of do have it in the indie scene, right, with labels like OSR, PBTA, Forged in the Dark, and now PBTA and Forged in the Dark are systems. So there's a little bit of a crossover there. With your suggestion for like BX derived, although I'd be worried about putting that in my product and trying not to get sued. I believe you're not allowed to make reference to the games as part of the OGR. That might get you in some hot water. But then we have things like there's that blog post about 5 styles of gaming where you've got classic, traditional, story gaming, yada yada yada. Again, like, all this labeling is only so useful. It's definitely not definitive or whatever. But some of that is kind of helpful. You know, when I'm looking at a system, what do I want to know? If it's got an OSR label, that does tell me quite a bit about it. Not everything, but it does. And if it says story game, I know that it's not a game for me. So like that is definitely useful. But I want to know about genre. I think mechanics and the complexity of those is also useful. Thinking about some of the other like key mechanics that you might want to call out. You know, is it levelless? Is there classes? Are there skills? That could be useful. I think a blurb can do a lot of that, to be fair. But yeah, I want to know what type of game or the designer intended people to play with this, right? Is it gritty, mudcore, dungeon delving, or is it grand adventure and domain play, right? And so definitely having that information is useful. And if there was, and I don't think it needs to be standardized, but having a clear way for people to communicate that is definitely good. Now, this is in danger of getting long, but I'll continue. Segueing from board games, I really quite enjoyed your playthrough of the various different monsters and whatnot trying to break through the defenses, and I thought it could make for a really interesting like duet board game, right? Where someone is defending, someone's the attacker, the defender is playing some sort of like worker placement game to build fortifications and reinforce things, whereas the attacker is they could play a whole different range of games, whether that maybe they're playing like a card building game, a deck building game. Sorry, but there's a fog of war about the fortifications. That the attacker doesn't know how strong each things are, but maybe they can intuit. They send in some weaker stuff and go, okay, well, that didn't break it through, so I know that it's more powerful than that, right? And then eventually they can break through, and there's some objective to the game. I think that would be kind of interesting to actually play out, and it sounded like there were enough rules and mechanics that you wouldn't need much more than that to play. So that was really interesting to see. Anyway, I'm really enjoying Tales of the Dragon Slayer. Keep it up. I'm enjoying the world building stuff as well. It's very interesting to see how all these things are interplaying and connecting and building new things. So keep it up, the good work. Bye for now.
Well, thank you for that call, Riley. Start off with the gold dragons against the Aspis and how that ended. That was totally unexpected. Interesting thing, after going through the battle and everything, I went back later and used the item saving throws in the original Dungeon Master to check what happened to the treasure, and a lot of it got melted down or smashed or whatever by the flame strike that the last gold dragon used to destroy the Aspis that were attacking the dragons around that cart where the treasure was. So a lot of that got burned into the ground, or especially in the case of potions, got boiled away, or their vials, their containers got smashed, and they get soaked into the ground. It might be interesting to ponder if them soaking into the ground itself, or maybe intermixing, has some side effects, or the melting of like some of the monetary treasure all mixing together. That would be interesting that's an interesting idea. I might have to ponder if something like that happened there, create some kind of effect. As for RPG classifications, yeah, I think it's a difficult animal. I know a lot of people have tried to do it. A lot of it's been very academic styles of play idea, and that might be a main focus. I know war games and board games focus a lot on a mechanical aspect, with the war games, again, with the solo play and complexity levels, and then with some of the more complex board games on the board gaming scene, they'll categorize them by the mechanics they use. You mentioned worker placement. There's also deck building, area control, things like that. I think some of the things that you mentioned, OSR, PBTA, Forged in the Dark, those are things that are useful to know. If you look in the world of video games, things like RTS for real-time strategy, or FPS for first-person shooter, which originally that was just, people just called them Doom-likes because that was the game that started it. And so when I think about PBTA and Forged in the Dark being categories, that's something that might evolve eventually into a genre or entire category of RPGs based on what that mechanic might be best at. I know when I always hear people talk about the Forged in the Dark style games, or the Forged in the Dark, the games that use for the Forged in the Dark system, there's a lot of talk about it's a heist system. So we might be talking 10 years from now about heist games the same way we talk about, well, this game is used under the Forged in the Dark license. I don't think using specifically BX would be that much of an issue, because at that time those particular game sets were referred to as basic and expert, and BX is just kind of a shorthand that the hobby, especially the OSR hobby, has started to use to refer to them. And that would probably even be true for OD&D, because again, that's not something TSR used. OD&D, they just called it Dungeons and Dragons. But that is a point worth considering. And of course, even family board games use very limited categorization, because pretty much all those have somewhere on the box player count and the 4 ages, whatever. And now that you mention it, that the idea of keeping things in a dungeon as a game is kind of interesting. It's kind of the maybe the inverse the of some of the video games, computer games like Dungeon Keeper, where you're building a dungeon and trying to keep the adventurers out. This is the adventurers, not necessarily, and you have games, of course, board game, and I think even some card games and video games where it's adventurers trying to clear a dungeon. And of course, RPGs, there are a lot of RPGs that are centered around that. But the idea of adventurers or troops just trying to keep things in a dungeon, that's an interesting idea. It's kind of like a reverse siege. So that's a good concept, actually. So thank you for that. And if you're not listening to Riley's podcast, Diegetic Advancement, you should be, and there's a link to that in the show notes. And now, more from my solo AD&D RPG campaign, Tales of the Dragon Slayers. For 3 days, the pack had been trailing, stalking their wayward brother. As far as they could tell, he had been possessed by something in that staff that he had picked up after the battle near the great fort from the fallen magic user. Something that was urging him to go to the fort, to go towards the forces of good. Their brother wouldn't say anything. Of course, it was hard to, with the staff so firmly clamped between his jaws. They could not corral him to go home, so they kept pushing him deeper and deeper into the wilderness, some going away to rest while others rejoined the pack, herding him ever deeper and deeper into the wilderness, waiting until time and hunger and thirst took its toll. They dare not simply move in to take the staff. The last of their brothers that attempted to do that had been turned into a pile of ash. Suddenly noses began to go up. There was a scent in the air. They knew that scent. They looked at one another, yipped in code. Potential allies, potentially a way to end this. In the course of filling out the world that the Dragon Slayers exist in, I have been rolling up random encounters for creature groups that are already on the map and in a location, much as if they were traveling through the wilderness or as if there were encounters coming upon their lair. One of these groups is the Hill Giants, who are currently allied to the orcs occupying the former Dragon's Cave. One of the encounters they rolled up were werewolves. And looking at the map, I saw that this was a little over 2.5 days, maybe, or so, depending on where in the hex everything was, from the encounter that Cudgel and his group had when they were returning to the fort with a group of werewolves that nearly killed Cudgel, killed one of the clerics that was with the party, and they were lucky to escape with their lives. So determining that this was that group, and I rolled some dice with a fairly low percentage, I gave about 20% chance it was them, that this was the same group. Why would they be that far away? First, I rolled to see if it was because their lair was in that hex, and that was not the case. And then I thought about Cudgel's staff. It's an intelligent staff. It's good aligned, so it would have hurt any wolf that picked it up as they were picking up kind of the pieces of the party. And they probably would have been in human form at the time. But it had a high ego. And to a werewolf with a lowish, 4 hit dice, medium hit dice, but it would, to an injured wolf, it would have had a high chance to simply take it over and try to return to its owner or to someone more suited than a chaotic evil creature to wielding it, because its special purpose is to destroy evil creatures, and its special purpose power is disintegration. So I surmised that if a wolf had picked this up and been taken over, the other wolves would have reacted to trying to keep it from returning this item once they figured out it was acting strangely to civilization. and that maybe over the course of keeping track of this wayward member of their pack had ended up in the hill giants' territory. And the hill giants, being of the same alignment with the werewolves, would they be willing to operate as allies to deal with this situation? Now, when I rolled a reaction for the werewolves versus the hill giants, it came out as neutral, 55% positive, and then when I rolled again, it rolled out as a positive result. So I reasoned that this would be the werewolves entreating with this group of hill giants once they came across them and they weren't instantly hostile to them as potential allies to essentially restrain this werewolf and take away the staff. And the idea being that they would warn the hill giants, this is a dangerous item. They don't want to touch it because it could take them over or it could disintegrate them. But would they be willing to help? And the hill giants, by reaction roll, were going to be willing to help. And incidentally, this is happening on the same day that the hippogriffs attack the orc lair at the dragon cave. So the wolves are going to kind of keep the hill giants abreast of where they're going and kind of keep their the werewolf with the staff corralled and kind of in a general direction so that they can encounter these hill giants and a couple of them can attempt to overbear and then tackle this wolf and hopefully dislodge somehow the staff from his mouth, and then they will hopefully be able to find a way to dispose of it, bury it at the location, is what I'm thinking. So at this point, the werewolves have kind of herded their possessed, their member that has been taken over by this intelligence staff into the neighborhood of two hill giants who are going to attempt to overbear and then try to somehow knock that staff out of the mouth of that werewolf. So this is a percentiles roll. It says that the initial determination of the success, that the base score to hit is the same as a grappling attack. If the overbearing attack succeeds, then you roll percentile dice again with modifying it. So we go up to grappling, and the initial grapple is based on the attacker's deck is based on armor class times 10. So the armor class of a hill giant is 4, so that's 40. Attacker dexterity per point, that's not specified in the monster manual. I'm putting them at average. So their average dexterity based on their size and what have you would be a 9. So that'd be 49%. Defender's armor protection, defender's not wearing any armor. Opponent is slowed or stunned. No. Opponent's base movement per 3% faster. Minus 10% per 3% faster. Hill giants, 12% move. Werewolves, 15% move. You could argue that if this wolf has been being herded around for 2 or 3 days without being able to eat or drink, that they should be slower, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use the bases. So that drops us down from 49% to 39%. Opponent hasted. Opponent's not hasted. So those are the only factors that are listed. So that gives us a base chance to hit of 39%. Now, determination of first attack initiative. Surprise, charging to attack, higher dexterity, higher dice roll in that order. I think the wolf would have a higher dexterity, but I believe the hill giants will be charging to attack, and we're going to check for surprise now. So, are the hill giants going to be surprised by what the wolf does here on a tactical level? Are they going to be surprised with a roll of a 4? They are not. Will the werewolf be surprised by the hill giants charging him with a 6? He will not. So this will be so we will go to charging. This will be a base score of 39%, rolling on percentile dice. And here we go. And we get a 20%. So 20%. So that's below 39. So that is a hit. That is a overbear. So we go to the second group, which is we roll again with the following modifiers. If the overbearing attack succeeds, roll percentile dice, modify the resulting total by the following. Attacker strength, plus 1% per point, and per 10% over 18 plus 2%. Hill Giant strength is considered 19. So I'm going to call that 18 plus 10%. So that's 18% for the percentage. That's 2 times 10, 20. So that's 38% there. Opponent slowed or 1 foot held does not apply. Rushing or leaping to the attack, they are rushing to the attack. So that's plus 15%. So that's another plus 15. And then we have opponent stunned or both feet held, doesn't apply, per 10% weight difference. A werewolf is a medium creature, roughly man-sized, a little smaller probably. The hill giants are large creatures. They are listed as 10.5 feet tall in the monster manual, which gives us, so we have weight plus per 10% weight difference is 10% for each 10% weight difference. Per 10% height difference is plus 5% for height difference. So we're going to say that the werewolf is, being roughly man-sized, a little smaller, is about 5.5 feet to 10.5 feet for the hill giant, which gives us a difference of 5 feet. And that works out roughly. I did this on the calculator, so don't be amazed by this number. That means that the hill giant is 190% above 190% of the wolf's weight, which is 90% more. So 10% for that 90%. I'm sorry, that's the height. So 10% for that. So 5% for that 90% would be 45% for the height difference. Now, weight difference. What is the weight? Again, we'll figure that the werewolf is close to human, so say about 150 pounds. And looking at hill giants, we have humans here in the world that are 6'5", 300 pounds and are pretty, at least reasonably athletic, and some of them are extremely athletic. You see them in sports. So if we ramp that up for another 4 feet, from 6.5 feet tall to 10.5 feet tall, that's another 4 feet. That's roughly another 2/3 more. So say 500 pounds. That might be a svelte for a hill giant, but say 500 pounds. So 500 pounds to 150 pounds, that's the hill giant is 330% of the wolf's weight, which would be which would be plus 233%, which would give us, so 10% for every 10%. So that'd be 23 10%. So that would be 230%, right? 230%. So 230%, 45%, 15%, 38%. This is putting the bonuses well over 300 at this point. Well, no, it's just, let's see, 30, 70. Yep, just over 300. Not well over, just over. So now we look at opponent strength. Opponent strength per point over 14. I don't think a werewolf would be over 14 strength. Opponent's dexterity per point over 14. I think 14 is probably about right for a werewolf for dexterity, because that's pretty high dexterity. Is the opponent braced? Since he's not surprised, I'll say he's braced. That's minus 10%. So this is going to put us just under 300% to this roll, which, I mean, we'll roll the dice anyway. We got 84. So we're at, say, 380. So the overbearing table, the result that we're looking at is over 100, which is opponent knocked flat, stunned for 1 round, with damage 4 plus strength bonus. And the strength bonus of a hill giant is 7, so that's 11. On an overbear attack, 50% of damage is actual, and the rest is temporary that is recovered at 1 point per round. But the important result here is that the wolf is stunned. So they will be able to knock the staff away from the werewolf. And at that point, the werewolf will recover his senses and be like, guys, you're not going to believe what happened to me. I could hear this voice in my head. It was controlling me, and it was just driving me onward. And man, I am hungry and thirsty and tired. So at this point, I think it's safe to say that no one really wants to touch this thing. The hill giants might be a little tempted because, well, we're mighty hill giants. It's not going to affect us. But I'm sure the wolves would have some influence on them, at least for the immediate future, and maybe the hill giants will revisit this location. But I'm going to say that the wolves dig a nice little pit, and they kind of herd using limbs or what have you. The hill giants herd the staff into the hole, and they bury it. So it's somewhere near the hill giant lair, and they both go on their merry way with maybe the hill giants peeking back over their shoulders, kind of remembering where it was, and maybe they'll come revisit it. But that's it. I hope you enjoyed this little brief bid into overbearing. If things had continued, we would have gone to the grappling, and the rules are actually fairly similar. A lot of the adjustments are the same adjustments between grappling and overbearing, so you'd have had a lot of the same numbers. Needless to say, a very large hill giant has an advantage over a medium-sized creature when it comes to overbearing and grappling. So I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for listening. The opening theme of this podcast was Strength of the Titans, and the closing music is Late and Out Radio, both from Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. If you have any thoughts or feedback, you can get in touch with me by leaving me a voice message on my Google Voice number, 864-209-1441. That's 864-209-1441. Or through SpeakPipe at www.speakpipe.com/Phantom Thoughts. That's www.speakpipe.com/Phantom Thoughts. Or you can send me a message or an audio file on Discord, where I can be found the Pink Phantom, or through email, phantomthoughtspodcast@gmail.com. That's phantomthoughtspodcast@gmail.com. I don't have to play or read your feedback on the podcast if that is not your preference. Just let me know.